video will describe the addition of extension rails to extend the rail in the Accu-Slice system for the purpose of slicing long boards. The length of board that can be sliced on the Accu-Slice system is dependent on the length of the rail. Basically, you can cut a board up to half the length of the rail plus 2 or 3 inches. So with this 36-inch rail, I cut boards up to 21 inches long. With my 60-inch rail, I can cut boards up to 32 inches long. We do provide rails going from 3 foot long, 36 inches long, up to 8 foot long. However, my preference is to keep the shorter rails on my system. It's just much easier to get around the bandsaw for maintenance, and also my shop is limited in space, and I can't afford to have a big long rail, extending out beyond my bandsaw. However, there are applications where I do need a longer rail. Recently I've been doing a lot of work making dizzy bowl projects, and for those projects I needed boards cut that were 32 inches long. So I did put my 5-foot rail on it with a 24-inch carriage, and I cut those boards for that application. But then that was done, I went back and put my 36-inch rail back on my system for doing my segmenting and other work for my various projects. We've had numerous requests to slice long boards. About 2 years ago I made a video entitled Slicing Long Boards on the Accu-Slice System. In that video I demonstrated cutting boards that are 54 inches long using an 8-foot rail and 2 carriages. As a result of these requests, we came up with the concept of extension rails. These are additional pieces of extruded aluminum. In this case, these are 22 inches long, and we join the 2 rails together using some brass keys. These brass keys are machined from a brass. It's 4 inches long and contains 4 set screws, and they're machined to accurately and precisely slide into the T-channel on the rail on the Accu-Slice system. So to use these, you would first of all attach 2 of these brass keys into the rail on your extension rail and lock it in place with the 4 set screws. These keys could be placed either on the top or the bottom of the rail, but it's just much easier to maintain the system by using them on the top. And once they're locked in place, you would just slide this into the existing rail on your system and then lock it in place with your set screws. What makes the system convenient is you can use your normal rail, say your 3-foot or 5-foot rail. When you need a longer rail, you put your extensions on. When you're done with it, you take them off, and you haven't tied up all your shop space. So you just push these together, lock it in place with the set screws, and repeat the process on the other side. So now with this 36-inch rail, I've added 2 22-inch long pieces, so my rail now is 80 inches long, and I can cut boards up to 42 inches long with this setup. The extension rail kit consists of 2 22-inch long extension rails plus 4 brass keys. This kit can be used on either the 3-foot, the 4-foot, or the 5-foot Accu-Slice rail to enable the slicing of longer boards. It's not recommended that the Accu-Slice extension rail kit be used on Accu-Slice rails longer than 60 inches. The Accu-Slice index table is just not long enough and sturdy enough to support longer rails. As can be seen from this chart, using the extension rail kit on a 36-inch Accu-Slice rail, one can cut boards up to 42 inches long. With a 4-foot or 48-inch long rail, you can cut boards up to 49 inches long. And with a 60-inch rail, you can cut boards up to 55 inches long. One issue that has arisen is the joints on the outside edge where the roller bearings ride. And I can feel a little bit of roughness. And when I was checking this a little bit closer, I actually noticed a little bit of a burr on this side, probably where these rails been bouncing around the shop. I probably got dinged up at some point. So I think that needs to be just filed or sanded smooth. And you can hear it as I run the roller bearings over. Just a very, very small burr. So let me try filing that off or sanding it off, and we'll see if that cleans it up. Oh, definitely better. Still here a little bit, but it's definitely better and smoother. For this first setup, I installed my 36-inch rail on my system and added two 22-inch long extensions. So this gives me a total of 80 inches of rail on my Accu-Slice system. So now I can cut boards up to 42 inches long with this setup. Now notice that I have both ends of the rail supported on tables. It's very important with this rail. It hangs out quite a bit, and you get a fence on here with a piece of MDF. You get quite a bit of weight, and you get some sagging in that rail. So you want to eliminate that rail from sagging. Also, I also put spaces underneath the rail to keep the rail off the surface of the table. This rail is actually above the surface of the bandsaw, like a 1/4 inch. And your MDF and sacrificial fence and your board go below the rail. So this rail has to be above the table by at least 1/4 inch. So I have a piece of 1/2 inch plywood here to support the end of the table here so you can clear the table. So now I'm ready to install my sacrificial fence with my first piece of wood. Now, the other thing I do with these boards, when I'm doing boards longer than, say, 24, 30 inches long, I prefer to glue the board to the sacrificial fence. I've done some work in the past using double-sided tape, and when you get long boards, the board may not be perfectly flat, it may be bowed or warped, and we start cutting it, it could possibly move away from the fence. So initially you might clamp it, the tape will hold, but the vibration of the bandsaw table can cause that tape to loosen up and you'll get an inaccurate cut. So to make sure that board doesn't move, my preference is just to glue it to a sacrificial fence with some Type On 2 glue. So I'm going to install the carriage on the rail. Sliding the length of the rail. Now the other thing I've done, I've installed a bandsaw blade. This is a 1/2 inch blade, 6 teeth per inch. You're always compromising number of teeth per inch versus gumming up with a blade. The more teeth per inch, the finer the cut, but also the more teeth per inch, the faster the blade will gum up with residue from the wood you're cutting. So, 6 teeth per inch is a good compromise in this case. If I was doing some thinner boards, I'd probably go to an 8 or 10 teeth per inch. If I'm doing thicker boards like, 6 to 12 inches, I might even go to a 4 teeth per inch. I prefer not to use a carbide tooth blades or the 3 to 4 teeth per inch blades. They tend to have a wider kerf, waste a lot more wood, and they give a rougher cut. So I prefer to get a smoother cut so I don't have to run my boards to my board planer. So in this case, I'm using instead of a 1/2 inch blade, 6 teeth per inch. So I'm all set now to do my first cut. I set my position of my blade to give me a squared surface, and then I'll cut maybe a board 20 or 30 thousandths inch thick. There's our strip of walnut just cut off the system. That's a 36 inch long piece of walnut, about 10 or 12 thousandths inch thick. So as one final test, I have some cherry here. This is a piece of cherry. It's 4 inches wide and it's 40 inches long, which is the absolute maximum I can get out of this system with the 36 inch rail and two 22 inch extensions. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece of cherry. Again, I'm using this 4 teeth per inch blade. So this is the final board coming off the system. I did use a 4 teeth per inch blade, so it's a little bit rougher cut. This definitely has to be run through a board sander or a board planer to get the saw marks out of the surface of the board. But I got a variation here of about plus or minus 4 or 5 thousandths over the entire length, both sides. So a little more variation than I've got in the past when I'm using a finer tooth blade and a shorter rail. For this next setup, I've installed my 60-inch rail, and I put my two 22-inch extensions on each end. This gives me a total of 104 inches of rail, which means now I can cut a board 55 inches long. So in this case now I have a piece of walnut on here that's 48 inches long, and I'm using 2 carriages. And again, the wood is glued to a 6-inch wide piece of MDF. In setting this up now, it's important to make sure that your sacrificial fence and board don't bind up against the bandsaw table. So I actually have it above the bandsaw table, maybe an 1/8 of an inch to a 1/16 of an inch clearance. So it slides completely clear past the system entirely. My first cut I used a 3/4 inch wide blade, 10 teeth per inch, and that gave a very, very nice cut. The accuracy of that cut was plus or minus 2/1000 of an inch, the entire length and width of the board, and the cut is very, very smooth. But with 10 teeth per inch and a 4-inch wide board, it was fairly slow cutting. I then switched to a 1/2 inch wide blade, 8 teeth per inch, and that definitely cut faster. Gave a little bit rougher cut on the surface, but still very, very smooth surface. And the accuracy was still plus or minus 2 or 3 thousandths the entire length and width of the board. So it came out quite nice. Then I left that same blade on with the 8 teeth per inch, 1/2 inch blade, and I cut 2 walnut boards. These walnut boards were 4 foot long by 2 inches wide. And when I measured these were accurate to within plus or minus 2 thousandths the entire length and width of the board. So extremely accurate, and the surface is quite smooth. In summary, I'd recommend using either 8 or 10 teeth per inch blade. In the earlier studies, I was using a 4 teeth per inch blade and a 6 teeth per inch blade, and it definitely gave poorer results. The 4 teeth per inch blade gave a very, very rough cut, and if you use that, it cut fast, but you have to run your board through a board planer or a board sander to get it smooth. When I measured the accuracy of the surfaces on the boards cut with a 4 teeth per inch blade, the error was plus or minus 1/8,000 of an inch, so it's quite a bit more error, mainly just due to the roughness of the surface of the board. The 6 teeth per inch blade gave a little bit better cut, but still had an error of tolerance along the length of the board of plus or minus 4 or 5 thousandths. So I definitely got better results using the either 8 or 10 teeth per inch blade. Also, the 3/4 inch wide blade is probably a little bit better. Since the blade is wider, it's a little bit stronger, less chance to move on you, so you get a better cut with the 3/4 inch wide blade. I normally don't use a 3/4 inch wide blade for ripping, but when you're ripping a long board like this, it probably would be preferable. One nice thing to use this for is a lot of customers have 3-foot rails for the Accu-Slice system, and they bought the 3-foot rails just because of shop space. You can't afford to have a 6-foot rail in your shop. It just takes up too much space. In fact, most of the time in my shop I keep my 3-foot rail on just because it's smaller, takes up less room, and I have other tools that I have to put in my shop to use that space for. But by having a 3-foot rail and then having these two 22-inch long extensions, you can add the extensions on the end, cut your long board. When you're done, take them off and you got your shop space back. So it's a nice application for people who have the short rails and want to occasionally do a longer board. So in summary, the system worked quite well. I'm quite happy with it, and we'll be offering this on our website very shortly.